The Dark Waters channel is for entertainment purposes only. Although information in these stories can be traced back to relevant and true sources, Dark Waters strongly discourages its viewers, listeners, and subscribers from visiting the site of incidents and encounters discussed or revealed on the show. In other words, we will not be held responsible if you are attacked by a Dogman, molested by a Bigfoot, bitten by vampires, chased by chupacabras, abducted by aliens, accosted by the Men in Black, investigated or arrested by the local law enforcement, CIA, FBI, NSA, EPA, BLM, or another alphabet group, whether
into the water, landing on her head. Now, I tried my best to swim towards her, but I wasn't a good swimmer at all. And as my childhood crush floated face down in the water, I saw a man appear before me. He was truly majestic. No wings or anything like that. But it was crazy. He was just regal. He was a black man, middle-aged, about 30 to 40 years old. And his eyes were so intense. He pulled Melissa from the water and moved to shore. But when I say moved, he didn't swim and he didn't walk on water. He kind of just flowed with it, effortlessly. Where any other man would have had to stroke and swim, it was almost like he was just walking through the water. He placed Melissa down on the ground, touched her chest, and she began to cough up water. Then he was gone. That was my first time seeing an angel. However, it wasn't my last. The next encounter I had was while on tour in Iraq. My company and I were out on patrol when our vehicle broke down 15 miles away from the base. We radioed in for help and waited. And then we began to take fire. After about 5 minutes of engaging this enemy force, an RPG hit the truck. I was blown 35 feet in the air. And when I hit the ground, there was nothing but pain. I still remember checking my arms and legs, making sure my limbs were intact, and discovering an extra arm. It belonged to one of my best friends. Man, I just knew I was going to die in that desert. Hell, many of my company did die that day. I was just about to give up hope when I saw a woman standing next to me. She spoke to me, whispering in my ear. She said, "Get up and fight. Right now, or everyone dies." It wasn't a request, it was more of a command. And as of this day, I realized she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to my spirit, to my soul. I was recharged. The pain was gone. And I fought for the next 35 minutes. Did things that I didn't know I was capable of doing. My mind was so clear, and I was fearless. When help arrived, I was standing. My right foot had been turned 90 degrees to the left. I won't say how many lives I took that day because it's nothing to be proud of. But I will tell you, I saved 5 men while fending off a total of 20. So is heaven real? And do angels exist? You bet they do. And one is with you right now at this very moment. The Jamaican Hellhound fly was in his room, moving from the door to the closet. After a few days, we're sitting down at the lunch table at school, and I noticed he has these red swollen marks on his forearm. I asked him how it happened, and he said he didn't know. We get home and tell our mom, and she writes it off as the marks on his body from his school bag because it's full of these heavy books. A couple of days later, my brother comes downstairs for breakfast, and he has these dog prints on his arms, his chest, and his legs. Now, at this point in time, we all freaking the hell out because we don't have a dog. In fact, we don't have any animals at all in our house. Later that evening, my uncle comes over and we tell him about the marks. Uncle Teddy, who got his name because it looks like a teddy bear, jokingly says, "You done got one of them devil dogs to follow you home from Jamaica." We all laugh about it and think nothing of it. But 3 days pass. I'm in my room and I hear this growling in the hallway. It's about 11:30 p.m. When I walk out of my room and look, I see these wet dog prints on the hardwood floor. Keep in mind, we don't have a dog. Now I'm freaking out a bit, so I go to my parents' bedroom and get my dad. We follow the prints, and they lead straight to my brother's room. We open the door. In the darkness of the room, we can see this silhouette of a giant dog with glowing red eyes. It's laying on the bed, right on top of my brother. Now, honestly, I can tell you I never, ever saw my father afraid of anything. But the look on his face was sheer terror. He clicks on the light in the room, and it's still there, this smoky figure of a black dog. And then it looks over at us, jumps off the bed, and turns into this bright ball of white light that goes into the closet. We try frantically to wake my brother up, but he's sound asleep. So my dad carries him into the bedroom and puts him in the bed with him and my mom. At about 3:30 a.m., I hear my dad going crazy, screaming, "Get the hell out of my house! Be gone in the name of Jesus Christ!" As I'm running out of my room, headed to their bedroom, this black smoky silhouette of a dog jumps over my head and up into the ceiling of the house. At this point in time, I'm looking at my father and I can tell he's angry. He pulls down the attic door and goes up into the attic and he is spazzing out. "In the name of Jesus, I want you to leave my house right now." Then there is this growling sound. It sounded like the house itself was groaning and aching. And after that, there was nothing but silence, peace, and calm. The very next morning, my Uncle Teddy comes over and starts questioning my brother about our trip. Turns out when we were in the market in Jamaica, my brother stole something, a little carved wooden dog. He brought it home and he was keeping it under his mattress. Uncle Teddy took it to a graveyard and buried it. Months passed after that, and absolutely nothing happened. When I finally got a moment alone with Uncle Teddy, I asked him why he buried this thing in the graveyard. That's when he told me because it was a hellhound and it belonged in a graveyard. During that conversation, I learned that Uncle Teddy knew a lot more about black magic than anybody in our family ever knew. He said he could get the same hellhound to protect our family, but in order to do so, we would have to give it permission to go in and out of our house. And he thought that that was a bad idea considering the experience we already had. He reassured me and my brother that it was gone and emphasized that it was way better for this thing to roam around in the graveyard than to come in and out of our house at will. I've been living on the U.S.-Mexico border my entire life. As a kid in the 60s, before things got crazy, my friends and I would cross the border all the time to off and come back. That was long before the drug cartels became what they are today. Also, that was during a time when Americans were still tough people, not today's watered-down wimps who stay inside, talk shit from behind computers all day long. Now, as an adult, living on the border, it's more like working a full-time security job than actually having a life. If it's not enough to have to even deal with the illegals themselves, it's even worse having to listen to this crap on the news. Migrants is what they call them. They try to make it seem like the only people crossing our border illegally are Mexicans. Let me tell you something. I shot a Chinese man who was stealing eggs out of my chicken coop. I was awakened one morning by two African Muslims singing Allah Akbar and doing prayers. Then, these two had the nerve to talk shit about me slow cooking pork on my own property. Now listen, even with all that stuff going on, I can deal with the people. But these damn walking wolves, or dogmen that you call them, those things need to be stopped. I first became aware of their presence about 3 years ago. See, two illegals had showed up on the backside of my property. One of them was in a world of hurt. His stomach was pretty much opened up with his guts spilled all over the ground. And the other one was sitting next to him covered in blood, mumbling. And I know this is going to sound messed up, but my primary concern was to make sure that they didn't die on my property. Now, years ago, I probably did everything in my power to save them, but nowadays, when you deal with this kind of stuff, they got more rights than we do. Now, these two guys were about 15 feet across my property line. So I dragged one of them back over, and I walked the second one and set him down next to him. And then I called the police. While I was standing there on the phone with the police, one of them kept on saying, "Lobo camanite. Lobo camanite." And he kept on saying that these walking wolves had taken the rest of their family last night. Again, I know this is going to sound pretty messed up, but I just thought Lobo camanite was the name of some drug cartel that, these guys must have messed over, or they was responsible for smuggling them into the city and they didn't pay them. Really, it's none of my business. I just didn't want none of the crap on my property. Turns out it took every bit of 25 minutes for the police and ambulance to get there. One of the men died, and the other one, I'm really not sure what they did with him. But when it came time for them to question me, the first question out of their mouth was, why didn't I do more to help? To which I replied, I did everything I was supposed to, which is call you. You were late. I'm not going to lie to you. Later that night, I was feeling bad about the whole situation. But you got to understand, I'm torn. You see, the last time I tried to help, I took in 2 women. I was completely unaware of the fact that these 2 women were being forced to smuggle drugs into the country by the cartel. And that shit ended bad, real bad, with multiple shootouts. And guess who's the police were on? Mine, not the cartels. Nonetheless, I'm not a heartless bastard, so I'm feeling down about the whole situation. These were human beings just like me, and I would want somebody to help me. I was in this mindset as I walked out of my back door to take a smoke. And as usual at night, you can see flashlights everywhere. It's the illegals walking around and moving in the dark. On nights like this, when I can't sleep, I like to get my night vision goggles, sit on the back porch and smoke. You see some of the wildest stuff going on out there. So I'm sitting there, smoking my cigarette and looking through these goggles when I see what looks like 2 big wolves running across the backside of my property. And by big, I'm talking about 400 pounds big. It was crazy because they closed in on this group of people. One of them circled around the front of the group, positioning themselves about 50 to 60 feet ahead of them. And the other one circled around behind them. Then the one in front rushed them and flushed them all to run towards the one behind them. They did this thing where they ran these people back and forth for like 10 minutes. It was almost like they were toying with them or trying to scare them. It seemed like it was all fun and game for these creatures until someone took a shot at them. That's when shit really got bad. Both these things, I call them things because they weren't wolves, because wolves don't walk. They stood straight up and started walking. Completely ignored everyone else and let them run away. But that person who shot at him, let's just say you can call him kibbles and bits. Now I'm sitting there, and because I had those goddamn goggles on, it didn't feel real to me. But that's when it dawns on me. This ain't no damn TV show I'm watching. Something just tore a human being into pieces. And then it didn't run off anywhere. They stayed right there for an hour. And that was my very first time seeing these dogmen. But it wasn't my last. I was born and raised in Cabrini Green Projects in Chicago in the late 80s. Everybody knows about the violence in Chirac. But one of the things about Cabrini Green in Chicago that people never talk about was the weird shit that happened there. My older brother was a GD, and mom worked all the time. At age 13, I was always alone. I'm talking about 18 hours a day. I only saw my brother when he was hiding from someone or sleeping, and my mom was never home. She worked 2 jobs. Crazy stuff started to happen in our unit when I was alone. It started off small, like the TV turning on and off and the refrigerator door being open. I would just brush it off. But then it got worse. The cabinet doors would swing open and plates would fall on the floor. But it didn't stop there. My mom would go to the store and get groceries and leave them out for me to put up. And then she would head back to work. The minute she left, the stuff would crash to the kitchen floor. I tried to talk to her about it, but she didn't believe me. And neither did my brother Kwame. So one night, he just so happened to be home when this red liquid started to appear on our bathroom floor. He went to the bathroom and saw this and was completely startled, started trying to wash it away. And when I walked in the room, he was freaking out. I just screamed at him, "I told you, boy. You didn't believe me." The following morning, when I went to take a shower, that same red liquid was dripping from the shower head. My brother Kwame started asking around and asking people about our unit. That's when he learned that there was a triple homicide in a unit that we were living in. A dope dealer, his baby mom, and his 9-month-old son got dealt with in the very same apartment we were living in. I wasn't able to convince my mother that something needed to be done, but Kwame was. He talked to my mom and had a preacher come out to the house. It took about 2 weeks for the preacher to finally get there, but when he finally came and prayed over us, everything stopped. So my story is going to sound weird. Maybe a little strange. And that's because it is. In my college days, I was a serious bookworm. But not the Harry Potter book type. I was a worm for military strategy books, war books, chess books, cool stuff that you could apply to everyday life. And back in those days, there was this place called the Baton Rouge Book Warehouse, right on Florida Boulevard. It was ran by this old man who was a farmer and lived somewhere in Baker. Can't remember his name, but he was pretty cool. The only issue I ever had was, the one thing I remember about him most was that he actually had issues with you reading books in the stores. He used to say stuff like, "This ain't no library. Buy something or leave." Now, needless to say, with the rise of Barnes and Nobles, he went out of business. But before he did, I used to hang out there, read and play chess. Now, this building was an old grocery store. I mean, the size of Walmart. And he really only used about half of it. So when you had to go to the restroom, when you had to use the restroom, you had to go through this plastic curtain. And then beyond that curtain was this real shady area. All kind of crazy crap back there. Old mannequins, pianos, just random stuff, boxes, books, all kinds of crap. You had to navigate your way through all this, then up this wooden set of stairs and into the bathroom. Now, once you got inside the bathroom, it was a face bowl, one urinal, and then 4 stalls. So I'm in the restroom doing a number 2. Keep in mind, this restroom is in the back of the store, away from everyone else. And as I'm doing what needs to be done, the door handle starts to shake. And I'm not talking about violently like on a horror movie, but firmly, like someone was trying to get into the door. I look down under the stall to see if I see anyone's shoes. Nothing's there. So I decide to ignore it. Then a few seconds later, it happens again. This time only harder. I start to freak out, and then I start wiping myself. I can still remember the sound of the toilet paper roll squeaking. It echoed in that quiet room. Then I hurry up and got out of there. Didn't wash my hands, nothing. I go down those steps and I start navigating my way through the clutter back there. And when I get to the plastic curtain that leads back into the bookstore, something tells me to turn around and look behind me. So I turn, look back up at the bathroom door, and there's this huge shadow of a man standing there. This thing was as tall as the door frame itself. It scared the crap out of me. I didn't want to look like a little punk, so I kind of strolled through the curtain casually and walked up to one of the guys who works there. And I said, "Listen, I think I saw something weird back there in the back." This guy is laughing at me. I mean, all out cracking up. He says, "You didn't know this building was haunted? Nobody goes back there, man. What's wrong with you?" And from that day forward, I did what everybody else did. I went next door to use the bathroom. So my wife and I decided to visit New Orleans for Thanksgiving this year. She had this bright idea of getting off the beaten path, and instead of staying in the Hyatt or the Hilton Hotel, which by the way I absolutely love, she wanted to Airbnb. So the house we rented was in a bywater, which is walking distance from the French Quarters. And we were scheduled to stay in New Orleans for 4 days. And when we arrived at this property, it was absolutely amazing. Walking distance from cafes and restaurants. And it had this beautiful outdoor courtyard with a fountain. I said this place was dope, and it was dope, like something out of a movie. The very first night, we went straight to the French Quarters and drank our off hand grenades. We spent 3 hours in Rick's Cabaret getting lap danced. We had one hell of a time. When we Ubered back to the house, it was 4 a.m. And although I was drunk off my, I couldn't help but notice that there was a light on in the house. Now, in the back of my mind, I knew we had turned off all the lights, except for the one on the front porch. But I was too drunk to give a damn. So we just went straight to bed. The next morning, we struggled to wake up and struggled even more to rehydrate ourselves after all the liquor we had. By the evening time, we were back at it and headed to one of the jazz clubs to see Kermit Ruffins. We had been there about a good 2 to 3 hours, and by that time, my wife was drunk all over again. I, on the other hand, chose not to drink because we went to a club in the hood. At the end of the night, when we arrived back at the house, there's a light on again. And I thought it was strange. But nonetheless, I walked my wife into the bedroom, tucked her in bed, and headed to the kitchen to get a bite of the leftover burger that I had from lunch. After eating, I laid in bed, watched a little TV, but as I lay there, I couldn't help but get this feeling that I was being watched. It was weird, and it came on all of a sudden. You know how people say they get goosebumps when something spooky's going on? Nah, this wasn't like that. It was like my skin started to crawl. I just felt uncomfortable. So with that feeling, I decided to close my eyes and go to sleep. I figured I was just tired. And as I drifted off to sleep, my attention was drawn to this vent in the floor of the room. For some reason, I felt as if there was a presence there. That feeling lasted for about 5 minutes, and then I blacked out. Later that morning, I was here about at 5:30 a.m. I was awakened to what sounded like something scratching on metal. Cindy, my wife, was still laying next to me in her drunken coma, but I knew I heard something. And this being an Airbnb, and with this being an Airbnb, I decided to get up and take a look around, just to make sure nobody entered the house. I turned on the lights. What I saw blew my mind. Remember that vent I was telling you about? There was this black smoke or this mist coming out of it. First it rose very slowly, and then it started spinning and spiraling, and it created this upside down tornado. Then it separated into these two thin streams and started moving towards the bed. Now all this is happening in the room with the lights on. For a moment, I stood there in shock. Shit, I didn't know what to do. But that's when I realized this black mist was moving towards Cindy. I quickly jumped on the bed, grabbed her, and yanked her from under the covers. Her heels hitting the floor as I dragged her out of the bed. This violent motion woke her up, and I think I heard her. She started to scream, and while all this is going on, I watched that same black mist move straight back into the vent. Now my wife is drunken, hurt, and pissed off. But I look her dead in the eyes and said, "Baby, get your shit. We're going to a hotel right now." She insisted on asking me why. I told her I would explain it to her later. We grabbed as much as we could get, and we got the hell out of there. When we arrived at the hotel, I told her what I saw and what was going on. And during this conversation, she revealed something very, very frightening to me. You see, my wife thought we had made love that night, but we didn't. I had put her in bed, watched TV, and fell asleep. I'm convinced that we encountered an incubus. I never told this story to anyone, Dark Waters. But to this day, my wife will not sleep without me spooning her. My family home is very close to a cemetery. And no, this is not a story about me seeing ghosts. We see them all the time here in New Orleans. But as a kid, my friends and I would often play in the cemetery. Hide and go seek was our favorite game, and we preferred to play this especially after dark. This particular night, we were playing, and it was 7 of us. The cemetery took up the entire block of our neighborhood, so the games would take a little time for everyone to get caught. But eventually, you would have 6 people looking for the very last person. This time, I hid up high in the corner, right up under a cement cross. And for 30 minutes, I listened as each person got caught one by one. The spot I was in was well concealed and elevated, so I could see the entire cemetery from my vantage point. While looking out, I noticed something strange. There were 8 figures in the cemetery. My 6 friends, who were looking for me at the time, and 2 other larger people who were standing there at the very, very far end. Initially, I thought it was strange, but my 12-year-old mind just justified it, saying maybe these are some people visiting their family. The game began to get to its later stages, where everybody was finally searching for me. And after another 10 minutes of searching and not finding me, they all began to call my name, which was a sign for me to come out and take my rightful place as the winner. So I started climbing down. And as I'm climbing down, I hear someone else call my name. It was this loud, deep voice of a man. From my elevated position, I could see that all my friends were frozen in place and looking around. And the 2 figures that were at the end of the cemetery were now running towards them. I screamed, "Run! Run! Someone's coming!" As I jumped down from my hiding spot. When my feet hit the ground, I was moving. Byron, who's the oldest kid of us all, was the first person I saw. He was looking back in the direction the men were coming from when I passed him, and he finally started running. Both of us reached the far end of the cemetery, jumped the fence, and ran into the darkness of this open field. We stood there, and one by one our friends came jumping the fence. Some ran home, and others ran towards the light of the playgrounds a few blocks over. As Byron and I stood there in the darkness, we watched that cemetery fence. After a few more minutes, a man appeared along the fence line. This dude was big. He stood there looking around. Then he screamed my name. "Chris! Chris, where are you?" That's when Byron whispered to me, "Bro, We need to go home. So we tiptoed back out of the field, jumping the fence, and emerged on the next street. We never told our friends about what happened. We just figured they would think we were bullshitting. My life has been touched, an overwhelming amount by tragedy. A number of people near to me have died. So many, in fact, that I find it very hard to make new friends. So when I finally started talking to this guy at work, named Moses, I was pretty excited. He and I met one night while I was in my cubicle working late. I was sitting there with my earbuds in, typing on my computer. And after hours, our office is pretty dark. We have these automatic lights, and they had turned off over 2 hours ago. The only light left was the light from my computer screen and a cubicle lamp that illuminated my workspace. That night, I had to get a quarterly report out by the morning. And my boss, who's to be breathing all down my neck. I was there typing, and I heard what sounded like a garbage can fall. You know those small plastic garbage cans? That's what we have in our office. I stood up, peering over the walls of my cubicle. And when I looked out, all I could see was rows and rows and rows of empty cubicles. You see, my floor had 35 employees, and equally as many spaces for them. But other than that, I didn't see anything at all. So I sat back down and got back to work, this time leaving my earbuds out. I had been typing for a few minutes when I heard footsteps. I stood again, and there was this man walking down the aisle towards my cubicle. He was a middle-aged white man with grayish black hair. Working lady said, "Yeah, I got a lot of work to do. I'm Moses, the night janitor. I'll be back and forth tonight getting things done. Don't let me bother you." Moses had on a gray dicky shirt and a name badge, so I thought nothing of it. Continued to do my work. Over the next few weeks, I worked a lot of late nights, and Moses would stop by in and check on me, saying hello. We started to kick off these little conversations about sports and about politics. There was nothing weird about Moses. He's a normal guy, but he would ask some weird questions like, what do you think about those Bulls versus those Lakers? That Michael Jordan show was kicking last night. I didn't have the heart to tell him, but Michael Jordan had retired years ago. And besides, I was really enjoying the conversation. Like I said, I don't have many friends. At work, I'm a bit of an outcast. Nobody really talks to me. My boss treats me real bad. Moses and I have been carrying on these conversations for about 4 weeks. Then one night when I was at work, this tall black man walked out the aisle, reached into my cubicle and grabbed my trash can. I asked him, "Where's Moses? Is he sick?" This man stopped, looked at me like I was crazy, and said, "That shit's not funny, bro." "What's not funny?" I asked. "I just saw Moses 2 days ago. He took out my trash." Then the guy got mad and said Moses died 10 years ago of cancer. He went on to explain that he and Moses were very good friends, and he really didn't appreciate me playing games with him. I told him, "Man, I only been working here for 3 years, and I've been seeing Moses almost every night." That's when he turned and walked away with tears in his eyes. The very next morning when I got there, I asked the secretary about Moses. She had been there for about 15 years, and she was able to confirm that Moses, in fact, was dead. So I said, "Show me a picture of this man." And it was the exact same guy. Since that incident, I haven't worked any more late nights at my office, and I won't be working any late nights again.